Perfect.
I'm the one that's off, not you,
Yeah,
apparently.
maybe Google Fiber actually is doing their job.
Right. Pace and internet is just not quite there. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Balance for Life podcast, where our goal is to help you uncover the secrets of happiness and success and, you know, happiness also. If you like what you hear, don't forget to leave us a 5-star review, hit that like button,
Yeah,
all
and
that stuff. Comment, share.
yeah, and join us. Make sure you're following on all of the socials. We are at Balance for Life. That's the number 4, Balance for Life podcast on
Mm-hmm.
Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and on Twitter. We are at Adam and Perry, all spelled out. But we don't actually do a whole lot on Twitter, so it's up to you whether
Yeah,
you want to go check it out. And then
for
you can
sure.
also watch us on YouTube. We have all of our episodes come out on YouTube on video every week, and we also do short videos every. Right lately, we've been doing short videos every day. So
Yeah, yeah. Trying to do a lot of short content for people who maybe want a little quick, boost, a little shot in the arm of cortisone,
yeah,
help them get through their day and uh, you know feel motivated and pumped up. So
that's right.
check those out.
Yeah. So I'm super excited about this episode this week. Um,
Me too.
it's
Really
it's
stoked.
oh yeah, it's something I've been thinking about for a long time, and I think we kind of alluded to it a couple of weeks ago in our practice makes permanent. Um, but I wanted to talk about the idea of perfection and kind of how I believe we have this myth, if you will, of what perfection actually is. And we talk about perfection a lot. And I think, especially in our society today, we talk about how other people should be perfect. And, whether that's a religious group or a socioeconomic group or political group, we talk about how, there's a lot of times when we kind of project onto other groups this idea that either they should be perfect or they believe they are perfect. And so I really wanted to kind
Hmm.
of talk about that today and kind of throw out some thoughts on it. So,
Yeah, I love that topic. Let's dive in.
yep, jump in with both feet.
Oh yeah, perfectly. No, I think it's interesting though. We look at it in sports, for example. Once in a while, an NBA player will like set a record scoring a certain number of points with a perfect shooting game, right? They had 10 out of 10 field goals and 5 out of 5 free throws and, scored 28 points or whatever, a couple more three pointers.
Hmm.
And it's like, oh, it was the perfect game. Or in pitching, I think the perfect game has something to do with nobody getting on base. Or I'm not a huge baseball fan, but right there's that the perfect game that a
Hmm.
pitcher can have. And so we talk about perfect a lot of times, I think, without maybe really thinking too much about what it actually means.
Obviously, there are statistics that we can definitively say that something is perfect. If you're 10 out of 10, that's perfect. But I think when we talk about life in general, um, I think there's always room for improvement, and
Mm-hmm.
and I think that one of the things that we think about or that we consider is as we look at other people, what is our expectation for another person to be perfect? When we talk about um, a prospective romantic partner or a friend or a business partner or anything like that, and I think a lot of times we kind of internalize or we quietly have this rating system, and I think that if we don't fall at a certain point where we think we should or where we feel like we should, we kind of feel a little bit jaded. And and so I think in that perspective, we need to kind of talk about this idea of perfect, but where does that leave us right now?
Hmm.
If I am supposedly perfect right now, then what's the purpose? What's my point
Hmm.
here? And where where can I possibly go from here? Is this the best that I have to offer? Um, and what can I do to improve that? You know?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think that the purpose of a vision and a goal that we set is to help us get closer to perfection,
Hmm.
right? To improve, but you can accomplish a goal perfectly, right? You can perfectly accomplish a goal that you set for yourself, which helps you to become better, but not perfect,
Right.
right? Even if you spend, your 10,000 hours that they say you need in order to become a master of something, you're still not perfect at it.
Hmm.
And I can't remember which pianist it was, but I remember when I was a child hearing a story about a concert pianist who, performed a set, right? An hour or 2 hours, whatever. And afterwards, someone was asking him like how he performed so perfectly or so beautifully, and his response was like, "I made so many mistakes. No one else noticed those mistakes, but he noticed things that he could have done better." Which I thought was a really interesting concept. Like, no matter how good we get at something, there's always room to improve it.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that kind of goes the other way too, where a lot of times we are our own worst critic. And so like
Yeah.
everybody knows you and I are in a band, and a lot of times we get up on stage and we'll play a set, and I might walk away thinking, "Oh man, I did so terrible today." And
Yeah.
or I'll be recording something and I'm like, oh, I just have to do it over again. I just have to do it over again. And then, you show it to somebody else or you talk to somebody else that was at that show, and they have no idea that you screwed up. And so I think that's an interesting thought. There is a lot of times, there is an expectation that we place on ourselves. And,
Yep.
and that is that, we're not allowed to be flawed. We're not allowed to make mistakes.
Hmm.
And if we do, other people don't realize it. They don't notice our mistakes. They're not really judging us for our mistakes. um,
Hmm.
we are the ones judging ourselves on our performance. And yeah.
I think what you're saying is we need to not get complacent with where we are and
Hmm.
continue to strive toward perfection. But we also, we can't think like, all right, I'm already there, right?
Right.
We have to have this hunger to improve. But at the same time, we can't be paralyzed by this idea that I'm never going to become perfect. So why keep trying, right? We have to find this balance of, all right, I need to keep improving, but like recognize where how far I've come, where I am now.
Yep.
And I think there's a balance there.
Yeah. 100%. I think there's balance in everything. And I think one of our challenges in our 30 days to a better you challenge has been, I think it was a few days ago, was to celebrate your wins.
Yeah.
And that's a way for us to kind of take inventory of what we're doing right, and to recognize that even though we may still have room to improve, there's always something that we can celebrate. There's always something that we can, you know, appreciate what we've done. And then at the same time, we're striving for improvement. We're always striving to do better.
Right. Definitely. I was listening to the Wes Moss podcast or Retire Sooner podcast a while back,
Hmm.
and he was talking about how as adults, we tend to not try new things, new hobbies, or skills
Hmm.
because we have this fear of failure. And that's one of the reasons children learn things so quickly, or maybe it's the other way around. Because they learn things so quickly, they're not afraid of failure. But I think children tend to not be afraid of failing. We kind of grow out of that fearlessness.
Yeah.
And so, children, as they're learning to speak, like my 6-year-old still says things wrong all the time. It's funny. She calls pretzels pretzels. And, we laugh when she does it, but then she's just like, oh, what is it? And we say it's pretzel, and she's like, oh, okay. And then she starts saying pretzel.
Yeah,
Sometimes you don't want to tell them the correct way to say it because it's too cute.
I know.
But um, we eventually grow out of that, and that's why older people often not try something new. They won't try a new sport or a new skill. They won't take up maybe painting if they've never done it, or dance. And that's one of the things that we can make ourselves get out of our comfort zone, uh, and learn new things. And if we do that, we kind of overcome that barrier. And I think that's really important to do.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. I think that's a really good point. And so, talking about, you bring up kind of our physical health and how we can break this stigma of perfection and this myth of perfection. But how can we apply that to all of the pillars of our health? Because that's what we're here to talk about, right? We're here to talk about how we can balance. And so I think, if we wanted to really talk about any of the pillars, I think it's pretty much a very similar concept. And I think that exactly what you were talking about kind of applies in everything, where we kind of give up trying sometimes, and we feel like if we're not perfect, then what's the point of even trying to improve? And that can have an effect on our mental health and put us into a state of complacency, and put us into
Mm-hmm.
a state of depression where we feel like there's just no point in moving on. It can affect our spiritual health because, for most religions, the goal is to be perfect. And if I'm not perfect, if I'm making mistakes, if I'm, doing things I'm not supposed to, then I don't belong here. What's the point? Why
Yeah.
why should I be here? Um,
Right.
and so I think it can have an effect all across the board, and I think financially it has a huge effect as well. You brought up Wes Moss.
Yeah. Well, I think some of the financial gurus that I gravitate toward, like Wes Moss and the Money Guy Show, I feel like they have this more balanced approach of, yeah, budgeting is important and putting away money for retirement is important, but you also need to put money towards enjoying your life right now and have a balance there. Was I feel like sometimes with Dave Ramsey, people might get this feeling of, I'm not allowed to spend money on anything fun, even though he doesn't really,
Hmm.
he recommends having a, what do you call it? Like an allowance portion in your budget.
Yeah.
But I still feel like the way he approaches things, which is really good for helping people get out of a lot of debt, can still put this feeling of man, I can't have fun with my money. I can't do anything until I've gotten to a certain point. And I think it's important to, no matter where you are in your finances, you have to at least put a little bit away towards, right? You can
Hmm.
have that gazelle intensity on getting out of debt, but also put money towards fun and living your life right now.
Hmm.
And it's trying to find that balance. So you don't have to be perfect with your finances, right? If you can, like, if you go out to eat lunch when you didn't have that in your budget, like you spend $20 on eating out or whatever it is that people spend on eating out. That's about, my wife and I will spend, maybe $20 to $40 eating lunch, depending on where we go.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I did that and I didn't plan for it. So where do I need to make an adjustment? And it's okay, to adjust as you go along, because we don't carry out our budget perfectly.
Yep. Yeah. So I think that's the important thing to remember is it's okay to not be perfect. We
Mhm.
talk about striving for perfection, and I think the idea there is that we're always striving. We're always
Mhm.
trying to improve, and it's okay. It's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to blow your budget once in a while. It's okay to um, fall short of whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish. I've always been of the opinion that when we stop improving, when we reach that state of perfection, is pretty much our last day on earth, or it should be. Um, if I'm no longer improving, if I'm no longer developing, I have no purpose. And
Hmm.
I think that's the best, I think, thing that I can leave with is the idea that perfection is an end goal, and that it is something that we can accomplish over time, but it's something that we don't need to expect to have right now. And we need to be willing to look at both ourselves and others and recognize that perfection is non-existent in this life, and um, there's always going to be room for improvement.
Yeah, definitely. I think this concept that we're talking about fits into all of the pillars in one way or another.
Hmm.
But I think the best fit is, or maybe the thing that we can talk about the most is in the spiritual aspect of it. And I think about when Jesus preached, he said, "Be therefore perfect, even as your Father in heaven is perfect."
Hmm.
And what did he mean by that? Obviously, Jesus knows that we cannot be perfect by
Hmm.
ourselves, right? It's literally impossible. We live in a fallen world. Even if you don't believe in religion or Christianity, I think everybody agrees that it's impossible to be perfect as a human being.
Yeah.
And I think from a religious perspective, I think what Jesus was saying was, look, I'm perfect and I've atoned for your sins. I sacrificed myself so that you could become perfect. And I think what he's saying is, he's not saying obey the commandments perfectly. In fact, he even, got after the Pharisees and the Sadducees for focusing too much on obeying the law perfectly.
Hmm.
I think what he was saying was, accept me as your savior, accept Jesus Christ in your life, in your heart, and that's how you gain perfection. He is the only one that can provide that can provide salvation, perfection, whatever word you want to look at. That's what Jesus meant, was humble yourself to the point where you realize that you can't do it on your own, that you need him, his atonement, his sacrifice, in order to become perfect eventually, and that it can only be done through his power and his grace.
Hmm.
So I think even when Jesus Christ said be perfect, he didn't mean don't make mistakes. He meant let me help you, right?
Yeah.
Accept me.
Yeah. Well, and I think one of the interpretations of that verse of scripture is something to the effect of strive for perfection. It's
Right.
not necessarily to be perfect today, but to strive for perfection, which again, is kind of, if you look at it from a religious standpoint, and we have expressed we are Christians, and so if you look at it from a religious perspective, from a Christian perspective, we are not here to be perfect, and that whole
Mm-hmm.
plan, uh, God's plan and Jesus's plan was that we would have opportunities to make mistakes, and we would
Mm-hmm.
have the opportunity, each one of us, to fail in our own way. And that was how we are supposed to learn and grow and develop. Because I think one of the things that we talk about with the whole creation story and Adam and Eve, and and now I just lost my train of thought again. I hate it when that
It's
happens.
late at night,
It
just
is
so
it is
everyone,
late at
yeah.
night. Um,
But Adam and Eve partook of the fruit, right? They fell, made it so that made it so that we can't be perfect, right?
yeah,
So that we are fallen also.
but also when we talk about them partaking of the fruit, it was kind of a necessary thing for them to have to do. And one of the things that we talk about in that experience is how Satan tempted and said, um, you have to take this so that you can be like God and know the difference between good and evil.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's kind of the whole concept of the plan, is that we are supposed to make certain mistakes, that when we make those mistakes, that's how we learn, and when we make mistakes and learn and grow, that's how we become um, our fullest potential.
Yeah. what I think is really interesting about that, and this gets into maybe a little more of a religious debate potentially,
Hmm.
with what's interesting is I think from my understanding, most Christian religions differ in opinion on that than us. Most of them believe, or at least some believe, that Adam and Eve weren't supposed to partake of the fruit, and we're living Plan B right now. And I have a hard time with that because I have a hard time believing that one, an omniscient God would need a Plan B,
Hmm.
and two, that Jesus Christ is Plan B. Right? I think uh, I I I just don't believe that. I believe exactly what you said, that the fall of Adam and Eve was part of the plan. I don't know how anything could not be part of an omniscient God's plan.
Hmm.
But also, I believe that Jesus Christ, um, as our Savior, was always part of the plan. That our Heavenly Father, our God, knew that that was going to be part of the plan.
Yeah.
Um, I, do we want to shift a little bit? I think it's important for us to talk about um, our view of others as thinking they're perfect, or us viewing other people as more perfect than us, and kind of both. I think both are dangerous.
Yeah.
But did you have anything you want to say about the previous topic before we?
No, absolutely. I think that was definitely the next
Mhm.
thing that I wanted to get into is, number one, um, sounds like you're having a party over there.
My son has a friend over, and I think they're playing a video game.
Oh,
So,
gotcha. Okay. Yeah, so I wanted to look at this expectation that we might put, or that other people might put on us.
mhm,
This concept of what is perfect, and this idea that somebody else thinks that they are perfect, and how do we approach that in
mhm.
in conversation.
Or that they aren't as perfect as they should be.
Yeah, that we believe that they should be more perfect.
Mhm. I think one interesting example of that is when people point to religious leaders to prove that that religion is not true, right? I don't know if you can see my air quotes; they were outside of the frame.
You
Uh,
froze actually for a second.
oh well, I mean, I didn't on my camera, so I
Okay.
guess. But what I was saying was that people will point to mistakes that religious leaders make
Hmm.
to try to discredit that religion. And I think that's kind of silly, to be honest. Take the Catholic Church, for example. Everyone knows there hasn't been a perfect Catholic Pope.
Hmm.
There have been some issues with certain Catholic leaders. But I think to say that, like, I can't believe in the Catholic Church because this leader did this and this leader did that. I love the analogy of, do you ever not go to a gym because there are people there who are out of shape? Or even
Right.
if, like, even if the owner of the gym, ate a donut, so I'm not going to go to that gym anymore. Like,
Yeah.
we don't do that, right? Now there's a little bit of, like, if you go to the gym and there's a physical trainer and you can tell that, like, they're not in shape and they don't know what they're doing, right? Then
Yeah.
obviously you're not going to trust that physical trainer, but you're also not going to expect that physical trainer to be perfect
Right.
in what they do. You're going to expect them to, eat things they shouldn't eat, and to maybe skip a week of working out at some point when they're on vacation. Like, we don't expect perfection anywhere else. I don't know why we expect perfection among religious leaders.
Hmm. Yeah, for sure. I think, and that's a conversation that you and I have had several times,
Mm-hmm.
when people judge an entire organization based on the actions of a leader or a few people, and I think that's a really sad way to look at things. um,
Mm-hmm.
and I think I love that analogy of going to the gym, um, and the idea that we we don't expect, well, and this is another topic that we're going to talk about, but we don't expect to go to the gym, or we shouldn't be going to the gym because we are perfectly in shape, right?
Right.
We go to the gym because we need to improve. And so if we look at spirituality and religion in that same regard, we don't go to church because we're already perfect. We go to church because we learn ways that we can become more perfect.
Hmm.
And I think that's another kind of broad spectrum thing that that kind of led me to this topic is the idea that when we talk about these things and ways to improve, um, I think a lot of people look at that as condemning us. You know, they
Hmm.
look at when somebody talks about things that they need to do to improve or what is perfect, and they take that as being that if you're not doing this, then you're a bad person. You know,
Yeah.
and it's kind of that same thing. I wouldn't go to the gym and look at somebody else that was doing, say, a bench press and say, well, that means that I have to do a bench press the exact same way in order
Yeah.
to be able to come to the gym, right? Like that's
Or I can't believe that they're doing a bench press. I don't want to do a bench press. Why are they doing a bench press? That,
yeah,
that means that I have to also. They're shaming me.
yeah. So I think that's something that we need to consider is if I'm doing a bench press, that means that I found a specific way that I need to improve. I found, a certain muscle group that I need to work on, and so I'm going to do my bench press. And I think a lot of times when we talk about spirituality, I've heard a lot of my past religious teachers and leaders that have said that when you prepare a lesson or you prepare a talk, it's generally meant as a way for you to learn because of the
Hmm.
research that you have to do. And
Yeah.
so if when I give a talk or when I teach something in a church setting or in a spiritual setting, I usually end up taking more away from it than anything that I give to somebody else.
Hmm.
And I think uh that's how we should be looking at it is when we go to church or when we listen to religious leaders or we read religious books, it's not it's not a way for us to condemn somebody else. It's a way for us to see what we need to do to improve.
Yeah. I learned in my bachelor's degree, which was education,
Hmm.
that people learn the most when they're teaching.
Yeah.
And so that for, applying that to what I was planning to do as a career, become a teacher, um, how can I get my students in situations where they're teaching what we're learning?
Hmm.
Because that's how they're going to learn it the best and it's going to stick with them the best. But I think one of the things you bring up, not condemning, I think there are two traps that we tend to fall into, especially when it has to do with religion and going to church. We tend to judge other people.
Hmm.
Um, we also tend to think other people are judging us, even if sometimes they aren't.
Yeah.
And I've heard people say like, "Oh, Utah is such a judgmental place," and I've always thought that was weird because I've lived in multiple states. I've lived in 5 different states, including Utah, in my life. Well, I can't count Arizona. I don't remember that. I was a kid. So let's say 4 states.
Hmm.
Okay, I've lived in California, Idaho, Nevada, and Utah um, for extended periods of time, and I do not feel like any one of those places was more judgmental than any of the others.
Hmm.
I think what happens in Utah is because there's a high percentage of religious people that people assume they're being judged even when they aren't. Now, I'm not saying there aren't people here who are judgmental.
Right.
I'm saying I don't think it's a higher percentage than in other areas. And I would even say that I think it's a lower percentage. But regardless of whether it's higher, lower, or around the same, I think we often fall into this trap of thinking that people are judging us when they really aren't.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think another way to look at that too, and I think that I would say that the majority of people are judgmental.
Yeah.
Um, not in a negative way, but I would say that the majority of people, when we see another person or we see an object, we're going to judge it. right? That's why we work so hard on first impressions, because we know that
Hmm.
we're going to be judged on our first impressions. And so I would say that the vast majority of people are judgmental people, not in a negative way. But I would also say that people who are judgmental in a negative way, which I think that a lot of people do, and some of them may not recognize that they do. But I think that, for those that are, that's one of the things that's keeping them from being perfect. And that's
Hmm.
one of the things that they need to work on. It's not, and so we shouldn't condemn somebody else because then you're no better than them. Um, we should allow
Hmm.
them the opportunity to learn and grow from that experience and make that
Yeah.
mistake. And so, like if somebody is judging me for something that I do, does that really affect me in a way that I need to be upset with that person?
Only if you allow it to, right?
Right? And so why not just understand that that is that person's cross to bear, if you will. Uh and
I
and
thought I thought you said that person has crossed a bear, like they made a bearing. They
no, that person's cross
their
to
cross
bear.
to
Yeah.
bear. Yeah.
Um that's one of the challenges that they face in this life.
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
and rather than come down to that level, be the bigger person. Love that person anyway. And practice the things that you supposedly are preaching.
Yep. By the way, do you see the irony in saying something like that group of people is such a judgmental group of people?
I do, and I've actually called out a few people for that, um, because I have been told myself that I am judgmental because of the religion that I belong to,
Yeah.
even though I like
I
up.
feel like you're one of the most open-minded people I know. So,
Well, and like some of the people that it's been years since anybody told me that, but
mhm.
the people that said that, um, didn't even know that I was religious until
Mhm.
like that came up, and then all of a sudden I was judgmental because I belong
Yeah.
to a religion, and I was like, oh,
Yeah.
so the last 6 months of us spending time together, I I I
I
I,
wasn't,
I
and now I
wasn't,
am.
and now I am.
Yeah.
I don't understand. Yeah, so it's interesting how, um, yeah, we get judged for being judgmental, but it's okay to judge somebody for being judgmental.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's human nature for us to be judgmental,
Hmm.
like you said. I think it's ingrained in us because we need to judge
Yeah,
in order to determine, like, is this person safe for me to be around, right? Is this
exactly.
situation safe for me, for my family? It's um, instinctual, right?
Exactly.
But at the same time, we need to be careful to allow, like you said, allow room or for people to be imperfect,
Hmm.
allow grace for people with the things that they're going through, be helpful where we can. And so we have this balance of, like, yeah, you don't want to put yourself or your loved ones in a situation that is could be harmful to them. But I was always a friend to those who uh, maybe others would have called questionable friends growing up.
Hmm.
But all of my friends respected my standards and my values, even if they didn't have the same standards and values. And I remember people would say, like, "Don't cuss around Perry," Um, and I'm like, it's cool. Like, if you want to cuss, cuss. But I appreciate it if you don't.
Yeah.
I never required that of people, but people recognize that in me. And so my goal is, I think throughout my whole life, it's one of the things that I've been good at. Right? We all have things we're good at and things we're not good at.
Hmm.
One of the things I've always been good at um, is I think not judging people for being different than me, and loving them regardless of our differences, and noticing, hey, what do they do well that maybe I should work on, and what do they not do well that I don't want to do, but I'm not going to let that get between us.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. And I love that. That idea of just being a friend to everybody, and appreciating when people do respect you, but not expecting that. Not expecting other people to respect your values and your beliefs. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, so I think that's great, and just understanding that other people are in a different place than you, and I think that's
Hmm.
kind of the whole idea and this whole concept of what we're talking about perfection is. I think a lot of people have a different idea of what perfect is,
Hmm.
and so how can I judge you on my definition of perfect?
Hmm.
And I think that's
Yeah.
that's another thing that we've talked about in the past, is we judge other people based on our current standard and our
Hmm.
individual standard of perfect, and that's not really fair to either them or us. To say that somebody is a bad person or was wrong. Number one, it's just not cool to judge somebody like that in the first place. But number two, to expect them to live up to our standard is just not really fair to anybody.
Yeah, for sure. Um, anything else that you're wanting to talk about before we jump into the challenge?
No, I think that
I have
actually.
I have one idea that I think maybe we should start doing in our episodes.
Okay.
Right before the challenge, I think it would be great if we each came up with at least one takeaway, one
Okay.
key takeaway from this.
Hmm.
You want, what do you think?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. So I think for me, it's not expecting too much of myself,
Hmm.
allowing grace for myself that, hey, if I make mistakes, don't let it get you down. I think that's one of the key roots of addiction, right? Is, man, I messed up again. I'm never going to be able to stop messing up. And you just keep
Yeah.
failing, partly because you keep getting down on yourself for making a mistake. Allow grace for
Right.
yourself to make a mistake, I think, is a big takeaway.
Right. And I think that's perfect. Like you said, a lot of times we we make a mistake and we get down on ourselves, and um, that causes us to just kind of become hopeless. And so I love that. The thing that I've taken away, the key takeaway for me is, uh, what is my expectation of other people? And do I expect other people to, number one, do I expect other people to be perfect by my standard? And number two, do I expect other people to be okay with my standard? Or am I allowing other people to have their own belief and not expecting them to be what I think is perfect? And at the same time, um, not thinking that I have to live up to some unrealistic expectation from them as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love it. Awesome. All right, what's our
Okay.
challenge for the week, Adam?
So the challenge that we have for this week, is I want to challenge everybody to really focus on, number one, what is your expectation of yourself and other people, but also to really kind of uh, deep dive into this concept of perfect and improvement and development. And what do you need to do to, maybe if you're not already on a path of progress, what do you need to do to start moving forward and to start moving towards whatever it is you believe to be perfect? And if that is just coming up with a definition of what perfect is to you, um, then that's where you need to start.
Awesome. I love it. Well,
Yeah.
thanks everyone for watching, for listening, however you're doing that. Don't forget to leave us a 5-star review and
Yeah.
give us a like, comment, etc.
Absolutely. And don't forget that we will have new episodes coming out weekly. We've actually been doing really good so far this year.
We
Um,
have
New
2024
episodes.
has been good.
Absolutely. We're staying strong. New episodes coming out every single Monday. And yeah, where can we be found?
We can be found on Spotify, iTunes, Amazon, Google, wherever you listen to your podcast, it's probably on there.
Yep.
And you're probably listening on there right now.
Also on YouTube. So if you're
And
listening and
YouTube.
not watching, then go watch. And if you're watching,
Go
then
watch us.
good on you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've we're both pretty good looking, so I think
Yeah, I'd say we're all
not,
right.
Not like perfect 10 out of 10,
No,
but
I'd say, I'm probably
at
a
least a
solid,
5.
yeah, I'm probably a solid like 5.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah. Hey, and join us again next week. We have new episodes coming out every Monday. So join us again next week. What are we going to be talking about, Perry?
You know what? Next week we are going to be talking about. Looks like. Oh yeah. I had this really interesting concept of. I can't remember where I heard this. I'll have to figure it out. But you don't think yourself into new ways of acting. You act yourself into new ways of thinking.
Ooh,
I heard that a
I
couple weeks ago,
like
and I was
that.
like, "Ooh, I like that."
I like
So that's
that.
what we're going to be talking about next week.
I am super excited for that episode.
Yeah, so stoked.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, everyone. We'll talk to you later.
Yep. Bye.